Whatever works. Now, I need green, right? That'll work. Okay. Good morning. There's a very good chance this is working. We want to get started as quickly as possible since we're running a little bit late. Let me get my notes organized here. And we welcome you to the last Sunday of the Creation Care Team series, Seeing the Sacred in Nature. Today's topic is birds and the web of life. We welcome today's presenter, Gerald Hoekstra, a retired St. Olaf professor of music. Jerry is an accomplished birder and a bird and wildlife photographer. He has had several displays of his photography here at Bethel. There will be time, hopefully, for questions at the end of Jerry's talk. So.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, as Gary mentioned, I'm a retired professor, and I'm used to classes of 55 minutes minimum, and it was even hard when we went from an hour to 55 minutes, so 45 minutes is going to be a real chore for me. And so if I move a little fast, that's the reason, and there may be some points in which I skip through some slides rapidly, and you'll think, I wish I could see that, but I just will have to move on because I do want to get through some of the things that I had in mind. Gary mentioned that, he gave my title as Birds in the Web of Life, and that is the title I gave originally when they asked me to speak. But I changed it to Birds in Their World. It's the same idea, but I think about how birds fit into the world, and I think it's appropriate that this one comes at the end of 4. We had the soil, right, the earth, and then the prairie. It would have been good if they could have had a 5th Sunday in February. We could have had water, so soil and water. And you think about the order of creation, right? The earth separated from, or the dry land separated from the water, and then come the plants. We think of the prairies, and then the large plants, the trees, and finally the fauna, and birds represent that. And probably the most visible animals, the ones we're most aware of in our life, the wild animals we're most aware of, because even if you're just driving around, you'll see a bird fly in front of the car, or you walk out in the morning, you'll hear a bird. And so they're present around us all the time. Last week, Bruce's subject was, is it okay to love a tree? And maybe most of you didn't think about loving a tree before that, but I bet you all love birds, right? I mean, I love sounds of birds. I love the appearance of birds. And people think of that all the time, and it's not an uncommon word to use with our feeling about birds. By the way, anybody know what this little guy is up on the screen? It's American tree sparrow, and it's a bird that's around here in the winter. They nest up in Canada. But if you drive along rural gravel roads, you'll often see these little birds, often along the edges. I'm going to play some songs. I think one of the ways we're aware of birds is we hear them. We step out in the morning to get the paper or to walk the dog, and we hear. Can you hear that? I'll make it a little louder if I can. Here. Play it again. These little high tink, tink, tink. Yeah, some of you may not be able to hear those high frequencies. We lose our higher frequencies as we mature. You will recognize this. It's the same bird. You walk out for the paper in the morning and you hear this, right? And you look around and there's a bright red cardinal sitting on top of a spruce tree. As soon as they sing before the sun comes off, and at this time, and in March especially, you'll hear them singing while it's still cold and icy outside. Or you take a walk in the neighborhood, you may hear this. What is it? Chickadee, black-capped chickadee, yeah. Chickadee-dee-dee-dee-dee. And their song. You'll hear this all around. Sometimes it's a minor third. And by the way, being a musician doesn't help people be better. It's a whole different skill. But sometimes it's a third, sometimes it's a second. And I think it was the hey sweetie call. Hey sweetie, hey sweetie. Another one. You'll hear that as you walk around your neighborhoods. Yeah, robin. And the song. So yeah, we're aware of the presence of birds all the time. When I go to other countries, I see, and I've birded a lot in other countries, not just the U.S., and I see these beautiful birds. Unfortunately, because we have light streaming in, we can't see them very well here, but Liam did turn out all the lights. That at least helps some. Painted bunting on the upper left. You'll see them like in Florida, Texas, you can find them sometimes, not very easily. The two in the middle are both tanagers, the speckled tanager in Costa Rica on the top, the golden nape tanager, Ecuador on the bottom, and then on the lower right, one I just saw when I was in Dominican Republic a couple of weeks ago, a tiny bird called the broad-billed toady. Gorgeous birds. But when I'm in other countries and I see these birds, I think, but wait a minute, our birds are really beautiful too. It's just that we see them all the time, right? How about a male robin? That bright red breast and that black head and the white eye arcs and the yellow beak. Or, for that matter, a mallard, things we take for granted. That bright green iridescent head and that white collar and the russet breast. It's a beautiful bird. This is a bird, oh man, unfortunately you can't see it very well. And when you look at them on ponds, you think it's a little brown bird. But right here is a really intricate herringbone pattern on the feathers. So from a distance, look brown. When you look at it, when I look at it on my screen, I see this intricate herringbone pattern and a little bit different herringbone pattern on the breast here. And then these wonderful golden feathers on the wing coverts. The head's pretty brown, but that's a male gadwall. How about the common grackle? That iridescent blue head. I know people hate grackles because they steal all the food off their bird feeders and so on. And they make there's some people don't like their call. I do, but it's kind of a raspy one. But it's a gorgeous bird. So here's what I want to do today. I want to talk about birds in the world. Well, I want to talk about the sensory world of birds, because when I go out birding, which I do a lot, and I think, I see a bird, I think, well, how is it experiencing this world? What does it see? What is it hearing? You know, I'm seeing this forest. Sometimes I miss the forest for the birds, but I'm seeing these birds and I'm seeing this activity, but it's not paying much attention to me most of the time, unless I'm being intrusive. And what is it seeing? So I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the habitats of birds, the ones we see. And I'm going to focus, by the way, mostly on birds around here, Minnesota birds, or at least U.S. birds, not other countries. The ones you might see, at least in our country, in our neighborhoods. I've got to remember when I turn my head, I lose the sound, right? In the neighborhoods, forest edges, wetlands and lakes, prairies and grasslands. I'm going to talk about migration, because that's important for birds in their world. And then, how are the birds doing at the end, in terms of populations? So the sensory world of birds. Think about it. We have 5 senses, right? Well, at least Aristotle said that, and that's usually what we think. But actually, we have more than that. We have a sense of proprioception. We sense of where our body is in space, right? We have a sense, we can sense, is this still happening? Maybe I'll just hold it. Sorry. Proprioception, body or balance, we have kinesthetic receptors. When we move our muscles, we know. So we have all these different senses. In fact, depending on how you count, we have 14 to 15 different senses. We usually think about the main 5. How about birds? Well, they have all the same ones we have, but they might operate quite differently, and they may be used in different ways. They also have some additional ones like magnetoreception. They can sense the magnetic fields of the earth, the poles. That helps them in migration. Many of them can, and use that along with other things in migration. Well, let's talk about vision. Bald eagle, right? Eagles have tremendous visual acuity. They have, 15 times? We have like 1% of our cones are color receptors, I think. And we'll get this right when I say it here. So they see about 5 times more detail, and they have 5 times as many light sensing cells in their eyes than we do, and about 16 times more color cells than we do in their eyes. Only 5% of our eyes do that. They can see a rabbit about a mile away. Also, they have two fovea. A fovea these are the focus points in our eyes. Well, they have two, one pointing ahead and one pointing to the side. I don't know how that works in their brain, but then they don't know how our vision works either. This is the thing about sensory world and thinking about the senses of animals. We always think in terms of our own, right? So when I go in the woods and I see a bird, I think, well, he's seeing what I'm seeing, right? He's hearing what I'm hearing. Yeah, they have the same senses, but their sensory world is entirely different. And this is true with all creatures, butterflies, insects, even dogs, right? They see different color than we do. So, yeah, much more detailed vision. As I said, they can see a rabbit a mile away, which helps them in. That one really focuses on the bird's eye, and you can see it kind of looking to the side. Eagles have forward vision. Most other birds don't necessarily have forward vision, but since they're predators and they need to be able to spot their prey when they're flying, look down into the water to see, this is at Mississippi Red Wing, hunting for fish, or saw this along Highway 56 one time. I'm not sure what he's looking at, but he's looking at intently. And we use the word eagle eye, right? Getting back to how we think of the world in terms of our own senses. We're so visually oriented. When we think about senses first, we think about sight, right? In fact, we use these words all the time in a general way, right? If you really have we say he has a vision for his future, or we have insight into a problem. Or the word, he was blind to it, right? We just use these words all the time, even when they're not related to vision, because it's so central to we don't use hearing that way. We don't use taste that way, right? I have a taste for going on a vacation. Doesn't quite work, right? I have a taste for my future. And I have a vision for my future, baby. Okay. What about owls? Owls are interesting. Big eyes. Notice how he can absorb the light because they hunt. They're crepuscular. They hunt in morning and evening, so they need to be able to hunt in low light. He can't move his eyeballs in their sockets. They only look straight ahead. But he can turn his head almost 180 degrees both ways. But those big eyes absorb the light. This is a little owl called a saw-whet owl, and not sure why those don't need that, do we? These go through in the spring and the fall by the thousands, especially along the Mississippi Flyway. Have you ever seen one? I went over there once when a man was netting them and banding them. And so we would bring them into the cabin there, and I got to hold one. Tiny owls. But they're flying and preying and finding their prey at night. So we just don't see them. And they roost during the day, if they roost in this area as they're going through, inside of a spruce tree. You probably aren't going to see it there. A mallard, most ducks can have a kind of a dome vision. Their field of vision is a 360 degrees around. They can see in front of them and behind them, and they can see all overhead. So it's like a dome vision. Notice how narrow his head is. So he can see above him, he can see behind him and in front of him. Well, it's valuable if you're prey rather than predator, right? To be able to see all around you, those hunters hiding in that, of course they developed it long before hunters came around. When a bird is looking right at you, he's probably not. Okay. Facebook photography website, birding photography people always say, this bird's giving me the stare down. No, he's not. He's looking to the side, right? Because most songbirds, their main vision is out to the sides. Not above, not below. If they want to look up, they tilt their head, and sometimes I've got photographs of birds like this. They're looking up or down. So he's not looking at you. Don't be flattered. Now, the other thing about birds' vision is that we have 3 color receptors for red, blue, and green, is it? I think it's red, blue, and green. Yeah, red, green, and blue. We see 3 color spectrums. Dogs have 2. One is kind of yellow-gray, and the other is blue, violet, yellow. And so they see everything in shades of blue, yellow, and gray. We see, of course, in colors the way colors are meant to be seen, right? Think of a triangle, blue, green, yellow, and we have all the different choices of colors in between. Think blends of those we can see. Those are, of course, the 3 on the light, not the paint color, right? Well, birds have an additional one, ultraviolet. So now, in terms of the options, think not of a triangle, but think of a pyramid, and think of all the additional possibilities of light. We don't see ultraviolet light. We can't even imagine what it's like. It's a whole nother spectrum of light. And in fact, when they see, these are cedar waxwings. We can't tell male from female. There are patterns in those feathers that they can see that are ultraviolet. So they can see a male and a female. Well, of course, they can probably tell them even without that, but they can see immediately. Or barn swallows. We see them flying around in the summer. They all look the same to us, male and female, but not to them. They see patterns, often intricate patterns. What about white? They always say, birders, don't wear white. And when I was out birding in Dominican Republic, I have a big white lens. And one of the women said, you really shouldn't have a white lens, you scare the birds. White isn't the same to a bird. Because what is white? It's all the colors of the spectrum, right? Looks white to us. Well, what if you add ultraviolet? We have no idea what white is to a bird. Moving rapidly, now that's different. That might scare the bird. I don't know why I put these down. Oh, sensing of movement. The visual processing speed. Scientists speak of something called the critical flicker fusion frequency. Say that fast. Critical flicker fusion frequency. It's how rapidly our brain can process the images coming in our eye. For us, it's about 60 per second, 60 hertz. And our TVs are made to work with that. That's why your dog looks at a TV and it looks like when we look at an old movie where you see these, kind of flickering. Maybe why your dog's not interested in watching TV with you. Dogs are 75 per second. They process it faster than we do. Many birds are around 145. That's twice as fast they can process. Well, of course, if you're chasing a fly, you've got to be pretty fast, right? And many insects are 200 to 350 cycles per second. Flies up to 350. Now you know why you can't swat a fly with your hand, right? He's way ahead of you. So in a sense, it raises the question, is their sense of time different? I often wonder about this. When that little hummingbird is scooting around, maybe in his mind, he's living as long as I am in my mind. And when I see an elephant, he probably thinks I'm like a scurrying ant running around, because his whole sense of time is different, right? So what is time? It's how we experience it more than anything, isn't it? Hearing. It's a barn owl. Didn't take it in Minnesota. Unfortunately, they're not here. They used to be in barns, but they aren't anymore. This was taken in Colorado. Barn owls, great sense of hearing. So I want to talk about hearing in birds. Notice they have these, discs around their eyes, and it channels the sound into their ears, which are under these discs, right? They don't have ear flaps like we do, but they have these big discs that channel the sound, and their ears are at different levels. So one is up here, the other's down here, which allows them to triangulate the sound much better, right? We can kind of triangulate it, where it's here or there, but when it's down there or up here, we have a little more trouble. They can pinpoint it. So a barn owl can be in a completely dark barn, and it hears a mouse scurrying on the floor, and it can, within a second, go down and nail that mouse. This is a great gray owl. Minnesota, yes, up in the north, right? Saxon Bog and up by north of Duluth. You can find these in the winter. Tremendous hearing. Well, of course, the ground is covered with snow in the winter. But they can hear a vole moving under a foot of snow, 12 yards away, jump down from their tree, plunge through the snow, and anticipate where that vole is going to be by the time they get there and come up with the vole. And not every time. This is a northern hawk owl. Again, a northern Minnesota winter owl comes down. Beautiful little owl. Unfortunately, that little guy on the right missed his vole when he came down. The hunt isn't always successful. Snowy owls, which are eruptive migrants. Sometimes you find them down here in the winter. They took this one down, 2 years ago, down near Nerstrand. For several years, you'd find 2 or 3 in the farm areas around Nerstrand. When snowy owls come down, they usually look for big open areas like farm fields, right, or airports. Airports are always having to haul away the snowy owls because they get in the way. This is a male snowy owl, beautiful white one. Tremendous vision. They can do the same thing, plunge through the snow to find their prey. When I look at those big fields, they look barren to me. It doesn't look like, can't imagine there would be any, because farmers don't even leave any edging along the road so that it's plowed right up to the road, but they find it. What about feel? These are they're short-billed dowitchers. I know it's got a long bill anyway. They plunge like many shorebirds, plunge their beak rapidly down into the water and into the mud, and they can feel the vibrations of the invertebrates down in there, and they can move toward them and grab them faster than we can even imagine it. I mean, they look like sewing machines. I'll show you what they look like. This is them in their breeding plumage. This is non-breeding plumage, breeding plumage when they're coming through in the spring. And by the way, those were taken in a big wetland. If you drive on Highway 1 toward Millersburg, just on the east side of 35, there's a big low area. Farmer was farming it for many years, and the state finally said that you can't do that. That's supposed to be wetland. And so this past year it was dry because of the drought, but for several years I saw a lot of great shorebirds in there, and that's where I took these pictures. Smell. Turkey vulture, tremendous sense of smell. From hundreds of feet up, they can smell carrion that's buried even. Buried in the foliage. They don't have to see a cow laying out in the field, right? They can smell the carrion. Not a fresh kill, right? It takes a few days before the smell builds up, and then they can find it. No feathers on the head. Well, you wouldn't want that if you're plunging. You want to keep, all right, it's a very clean bird, like all birds, very clean. But notice that the big nostrils, very keen sense of smell. This is the black vulture, which you'll see in the south. We don't get them up here. They find their prey or their carrion by vision, or more often they follow the turkey vultures around and hone in on what they found. But they are not scent birds. If you're interested in all this stuff, there are some good books. What It's Like to Be a Bird by David Allen Sibley, and An Immense World, which is about the sensing of all different creatures. So I'm way behind, but I'll move rapidly. Birds in our neighborhoods. House sparrows, another bird we don't like, comes to our feeders. But notice that big beak, great for cracking seeds. There's our chickadee. I always like to see what birds are eating. Sumac. Looks like the lichen off the branch, right? Now, whether he's finding insects in there that I can't see, or whether he's eating that, I don't know. Very acrobatic little birds, jumping around constantly. Cardinal, I took this in Oaklawn Cemetery winter before last. Notice what he's done. He's peeled open a little section of the branch, and he's taking the, not syrup, sap, thank you. The sap out of that branch, yeah. I mean, I never thought of that before I saw this bird doing it, but it's a great way to get some extra calories in the winter, isn't it? These are female cardinals. Sometimes I think they're more beautiful than the all red birds. Goldfinches, they come to your feeders, right? But they also eat seeds in the field. Here's some thistles, and I think wheat on the left. I can't remember. I don't know the one on the left is. They come through. Now people say, what happened to all the goldfinches? I don't see any of those little yellow birds anymore. Well, in the fall, the males turn brown. Whether this is a juvenile or a female, I'm not sure, but it's a fall bird coming through, and you can see the seeds are dry. Those are all taken, I think, in the arb. Birds that come to your feeders, house finches, little red-fronted birds, those are the males. This is a mourning dove that landed on our deck a while back, and he was cooing. And I never noticed this before, but when they coo, his throat would bulge open. But look at the beauty. Look at that iridescent pattern on the neck and that bright blue ring on the eye and that blue beak. They'll often come to your feeders, but they'll be on the ground. They're ground feeders. They'll take the seeds that fall onto the ground, right? Chickadees. If you see a bird walking down a tree, I'm sorry, nuthatches. If you see a bird walking down a tree, it's a white-breasted nuthatch. This one has some kind of a insect. You can't see that. This one has some kind of a seed in his mouth. But even they're here all winter long, and they find larvae and other insects in the bark of the trees. Find enough to keep them going all winter. This is one we only see in the winter if we see it. Red-breasted, it's a little smaller than the white-breasted nuthatch. One that you will see along the roads if you're up north, the pine grosbeak. This is the male, one on the upper left eating crab apples. And what are those seeds? Those seeds are familiar. The ones on the right. Is that ash? Thank you. As I said, I see the birds. I miss the trees. This is a female either getting seeds or grit along the road. Those are all taken up in northern Minnesota. This is a red crossbill. No, we don't see them in our yards. It's a northern woods bird, a Canadian bird, nests in Canada, but comes down into upper parts of Minnesota. Notice that unique crossbill, and that's designed through evolution, right, for cracking open pine cones. They split open the cone, they grab the seed out from inside, they shuck off the shell, and they swallow the seed. There are videos of that. It's an amazing thing. There's another one that we have called the white-winged crossbill, but that's the red crossbill. And then another bird, not in our neighborhoods, but up north, the Bohemian waxwing. And in the North Shore, you'll find, I do know this seed, this mountain ash. And in the fall, lots of mountain ash. And as the winter comes, November, December, gradually disappears as these birds in big flocks work their way down the shore and eat all the mountain ash berries. Birds along the road, horned larks. You can see his horns there. You probably don't see these birds unless you stop with binoculars and look closely. But you'll see birds fluttering up from the side of the road in the winter. They're here all winter. You can find them now. In fact, this is the guy's in a little squall. I was down on the road taking that, and it was pretty cold. But sometimes I couldn't even see the bird. This was taken south of town, just south of Dundas, east of Dundas, west of Dundas. Often you'll see a whole flock flying up, 50 to 100 birds, little white birds. Those are snow buntings, and they settle along the road. They get grit. Who knows what they're getting in those? I never know what they're finding. They're seeds, maybe? Insects? Snow fleas? I don't know. But they're always feeding, and they find enough to keep them going through the winter. This is a Lapland longspur. You probably won't see that if there's no snow. Right? Pretty hard to pick out, even if and only if it lands where you see where it is. This is I took in Alaska. This is the same bird, but it's a breeding plumage. A little different, and that guy has a little insect in his beak too that he found along this gravel road took this up near Nome. Forest and forest edge birds. Indigo bunting. If you go to the Arb or to the right, Cannon River Wilderness area, you'll see these. Scarlet tanager. Ovenbird in the background. Sounds kind of like a robin with a sore throat, maybe, right? Red-eyed vireo. Most of the time you can't see the red eye, but in the right light, beautiful red eye. Green bird with a gray cap. And they nest around here. You find them in the woods. The Arb, Cannon River Wilderness area. As a oriole, of course, they'll come to feeders if you have fruit out, but you find them in the woods. This is from Cannon River Wilderness area. And I'm not sure what kind of a seed this one's eating, but feeding on some kind of a seed on the tree. One of the most common woodpeckers here is the red-bellied woodpecker. It has a little bit of reddish tinge on the belly, but most of us don't see that. What we see is that red cap. not to be confused with the red-headed woodpecker. This is, the one on the left is prying some insects probably out from under this bark, and this one is taking advantage of the corn crop down near the southwest of town. Red-headed woodpecker, we think of woodpeckers as burrowing into the wood to pull out worms and insects and caterpillars and so on in the wood, right? Many of them do a great job of fly catching too. The red-headed woodpecker is really more of a fly catcher. And this one here, he's jumped out and caught a little bee or fly of some kind. And I think that was taken in the Carlton Arb. They nested in the Arb a couple of years ago. There was actually a nice big tree with a hole in it, and the next year, it was over there 2 years, and then the next year it blew down, and I haven't seen them since. One of most people's favorite, the pileated woodpecker, that's a juvenile, and this is a pair along the river in the Arb checking out a nest hole. They didn't actually nest in that tree that year, probably because there was too much traffic of people walking along the trail and chattering along the way. The warblers come through in the spring in big numbers. May is great for warblers. This is a chestnut-sided warbler. They nest north of here, but they come through in May. Spring plumage of a male and the fall plumage. A lot of birds will change their plumage when they're not breeding. This is the breeding plumage, that wonderful chestnut sides and that mustard cap. Blackburnian warbler, flame-colored throat. This is the male, this is the female, and she's got some kind of a little worm caterpillar on there too. This is the morning warbler. We saw him staring at us, earlier. And one of my favorites, the black-throated green warbler. Looks much better in life than on that screen. But this is the blue-winged warbler. They nest in Canada River Wilderness area. If you have really good hearing, you can hear them. It's kind of a bzz, 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 bzz. Golden winged warbler, this is a Minnesota specialty. A lot of people come to Minnesota to see this bird. It's in danger, it's threatened. But they nest up in north central Minnesota, like north of St. Cloud. And this one was taken in Sherburne National Wildlife Refuge, this photograph. Beautiful little bird. You find them in the forests of, say, Pennsylvania but in Minnesota. But Minnesota, especially Minnesota, Wisconsin, Minnesota especially is the place where they're doing work to kind of preserve the habitat they need for nesting. Oh, some more cedar waxwings. These are right at a bridge in the Arb. There were some honeysuckles, and they were feasting on those berries that was coming through in the fall. But this one caught an insect. If you walk through in October, you'll often see birds hawking insects over the river. Those are cedar waxwings in most cases. You see a lot of them kind of moving around. Cedar waxwings are late nesters. Like a lot of birds nest right away when they get here. Cedar waxwings take their time. It's more like August when they nest, and they leave pretty late too. So one of the last birds to leave in the fall. This is our yellow-billed cuckoo. Found some kind of a nice big robber fly or something. This was down in Canada River Wilderness area. And the most common warbler around here is coming in the spring and the fall, the yellow-rumped warbler. How am I doing for time? Yellow-rumped warbler, and then this is how they come through in the fall. I think I'm just going to move very rapidly here. Wood duck is one of our most beautiful birds. I took this over at Superior Drive Pond right in town this winter. Redhead. Sometimes people call the mallard the greenhead, and you can see why, the redhead and the greenhead. Blue-winged teal, gorgeous bird with an iridescent head, and these little hooded mergansers flirting with that female who pays no attention to them. They do these strange displays where they crane their necks and arch their backs. Red-breasted merganser. These are, again, trying to impress this female with how fast they can scoot through the water, and they do this kind of dance. I think of it as a water dance where they contort themselves. Horned grebe. Red eyes. In the fall, in the winter, they're just gray. I feel sorry for people who live in the south and only see these birds in their non-breeding plumage. Loon, there's a loon feeding its young. There's a pied-billed grebe taking a perch. Snow goose. This is snow geese in South Dakota. They come through in huge numbers in the western part of the state. This is a bird that everybody loves to hate, the double-crested cormorant, because people say it takes their fish. Notice what fish it has. I'm going to have to move more rapidly here. There's a great blue heron. They eat just about anything they can get down their throat, and they must have pretty big throats. This is up in Fergus Falls, the nesting great egret. These are green herons. They were taken in a pond right over by Jefferson Parkway, the wet ponds there. This is a juvenile. He's got a nice big frog there. He's ready to, and yes, he did get it down his throat. I won't show you that picture. Notice again how they camouflage. If you were walking along, would you see this bird? You look over at the pond, probably not. These are, yeah, well, that's part of its delight. These are birds, gulls, moving rapidly through these. Yeah, that's a pretty big thing to put down your throat to a starfish. That's not Minnesota, obviously. That's in Georgia. It's a herring gull, juvenile. Kingfishers. This is in the Arb. This male stayed around all through December one year when it was down like 20 below. My fingers were freezing when I was trying to take pictures. He would go into the water and come up, and there would be frozen ice on his beak. But notice he got a fish. I was hoping he'd stay around till January 1 so I could get him on my 2022 list. January 1, he was gone. I like this one, right? Killdeers, we have a lot of these around here. They do, if you see one doing a kind of a broken wing display, he's not in trouble. He's got a nest nearby, or she's got a nest nearby. Or maybe a fledgling nearby. This is a fuzzy little killdeer fledgling. Some other shorebirds that we had come through in the spring. I want to show you how they, it'll take a little while for this video to come up. Oops, it didn't. Well, this is in California, a willet, phalarope. Interesting thing about the phalaropes is the females are much more colorful than the males. They spin around in the water, and that's how they stir up the prey, and then they quick dab down and get it. But they do this spinning motion. This was, again, taken in that wetland out near Millersburg, American avocets. Notice that upturned beak. They sweep it back and forth on the surface of the water and get little insects off the surface. So it's handy to have an upturned beak, right? To do that, you can see what you're doing. These were taken in a wetland near Northfield. Also, these are dunlins. This is in New York. Winter, notice no color by the thousands along the shore. This is how they look in the winter. This is a semi-palmated plover, a little bird. These run along the shore, and this is up in Alaska, and this is how they nest. This one's nesting. They just build a nest in the rocks. Didn't want to walk over and see the nest because I didn't want to disturb it, but spotted sandpiper. This was taken in Whitetail Woods Regional Park. This was in Maine. This was in the Arb in the fall. Notice he's lost his spots. These are East Coast birds. Oh, man. Well, I got to do this. There's a big prairie out southwest of Denison called Kester Prairie. Huge prairie. I don't recommend walking in it, although I do, because you can easily twist your ankle. It's full of holes and high grass, and if you're brave, good ankles, walk in it. You'll see meadowlarks, you'll see bobolinks. These are both in the Arb. Once in a while you can find them there. No, these are juveniles from Kester Prairie. This one I saw on a path in the Arb a few years ago. Dick Sissel. The names of some birds come from their song, like that one. My favorite, feisty little guys. You walk near their nest and they're going to stand up and let you know you're in their way. Get out of here, right? With that little chatter. I like it when they do this kind of a tipsy, and then they grab two branches and sprawl out. Some of the sparrows in the grasslands, red-winged blackbirds, those bringing in prey, building a nest. You find them they gather up by the hundreds or thousands. You see these big flocks in the fall, and they fly down to Texas or southern U.S. Bobolink's my favorite. You can drive through the gravel road that goes next to Hester Prairie and you'll hear this, and you'll see blackbirds flying around out there. That tinkly sound. And again, the name comes from the call. Female. And I'm going to quickly go through. Sorry, these are all the scavengers and migration. I want to talk about migration. It's amazing when you think about it. These little birds, some of them flying from Canada down to Argentina, right? Or, in the case of this little bird, they nest up in Alaska. I saw them up there when I was up there in the summer. And they fly, I'm going to open up this. Well, they fly down through across Canada, and then they stage kind of in Newfoundland, fatten up there, East Coast. Then they fly down across the Atlantic. Might take them 3 days or so. They might stop, some will stop in the Caribbean islands, Hispaniola or whatever, and then down to Argentina, or Brazil. So over the ocean for several days. This one's the most amazing. I took this photo up in Alaska. Took this photo up in Alaska, in a little stream near Nome. I wanted to see the bar-tailed godwit because I knew this guy had been in New Zealand, or this female had been in New Zealand in the winter, and had come all the way back. September 21, they tracked him with a little. So a male flew nonstop more than 8,100 miles from Seward, Alaska, down to New South Wales. It's Australia. And then it flew, it went there first, and then went to New Zealand. Think about that. And these birds don't coast like an albatross. They're flapping their wings the whole time. And they fatten up, like put on 50% more of their body weight, I think it is, before they leave. By the time they land, all their innards are mostly, what's the word? Not decayed, but shrunk. And they have to build them up again when they land. In 2020, a female accomplished it in 8 days, 12 hours at an average speed of 35 miles an hour. So they come down like this from Alaska to New South Wales. Then they go back and they stop in the Yellow Sea, and that's such a crucial spot, not only for this bird, but for so many birds. And the habitat is rapidly disappearing with development. Fortunately, the Chinese government recently stopped all the development, completely stopped it. You can do that when you're a totalitarian country, right? So there will be no more. And so some of that land is being preserved, but it's a crucial stopover for so many birds. Red knots. They come up from South America, they stop on the East Coast here, they fatten up on horseshoe crabs, horseshoe crab eggs, and horseshoe crab eggs are rapidly disappearing because fishermen were taking the horseshoe crabs and using them as bait. Got a little video here that shows them all feeding. Is it going to play? Played at home. Nesting up on the tundra. For some reason, these videos don't want to play. Well, Arctic tern, these again, they fly from the Arctic to their non-breeding habitat, Antarctica. Right? If you're an Arctic tern, why would you want to go to Florida? You want to go to Antarctica for the winter, right? When it's winter there. But again, they fly just huge distances to get. I mean, some birds spend their life out at sea. They only come to land to nest. Northern gannets are like that. This is in Newfoundland. It's a nesting colony of northern gannets, thousands and thousands of them, plus a few other birds, murres and razorbills. There's a pair of gannets. Think of that. They're out at sea for the year. They're going to nest. They come in, and there's 1,000 birds there, or thousands of birds, and they've got to find their mate. But they do it. Right? To us, they all look the same. To them, they don't look the same. They don't all smell the same. They don't all talk the same. They can find their mate immediately because they're monogamous, in the sense that they same partner year after year. And there is one with a little chick in the nest. Puffins do the same thing. They go out to sea. Mary and I were in Maine in October, 2 years ago, and we just missed the last of the puffins had gone out to sea. You couldn't even see them if you were out in the boat because they're way out there. But they're nesting on the rocks. This is in Newfoundland and in July. So I'm flying past our boat. Bobolinks, notice how they change color. And here I am going to go to the website. How am I doing? I'm out of time, but I'm going to go to this website, and this may be all I'll do. So this is a website that shows where they are in the winter. Bobolinks. Notice they're all down there in South America, right? Now, this little bar here will tell you where so this is right at this time of year. This is where they all are. Now let's move through the year. Okay, let's skip to June. Here's mid-May. Oops. Now they're in Florida, and they went across the Caribbean. They flew all that way, and if you keep going, I'm going to change this. Let's see, maybe rotate this a little more. Notice where they are in June and July. Right where we are, right? So I'm going to put it on play now. You'll be able to see them moving. So now we're moving through September, October, November, December, and they're all back down there. But you didn't see them going through Mexico, right? Now they're coming back up. Suddenly they're in Florida. They've flown over Brazil and over the Caribbean, and some of them stop in Florida, and they come up here. So tremendous feat of migration. So it helps to have that sense of magnetic field, but also they fly by the stars, whatever else. I'm going to have to quit because we're out of time. So I guess, if you have questions, feel free to come up. I have a website, by the way, lots of photographs on it. If you're interested, on Flickr, you can look up my name there if you want to see more of these birds or see them in better color. I'm sorry, as I said, I'm used to 55 minutes or an hour, and it's just hard for me to do 45 minutes. So. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. As you can tell, a lot of these birds are out there in Minnesota that you can see, but you have to look. So thank you, Jerry. She's asking, is there anything that we can be doing currently?
Keep your cats indoors. Cats are the worst killer of birds. Preserve habitat. Like don't rake up the leaves out of your flower beds. I got home last week, I looked out, and there were a whole bunch of juncos finding insects in our flower bed. Who knew they were there? Window protections. Support the American Bird Conservancy.